Introduction. The setting of a classic. Few rivalries in world sport carry the weight, history, and raw emotion of the Ashes. Every delivery, every session, and every decision echoes with more than a century of tension between England and Australia. And as the final test of this Ashes series unfolded, it looked, once again, like the familiar story was about to repeat itself. Australia were in control. The scoreboard was heavy in their favor. The series result was already secure. And yet, cricket has a way of producing moments that refuse to follow the script. This is the story of a test match that appeared to be drifting toward an inevitable Australian victory, until a young English batter, barely established on the international stage, produced an innings of rare courage, skill, and defiance. This is the story of how the Aussies was set for the win, but Jacob Bethell hit a sublime century that forced the cricketing world to stop, watch, and believe. Context: where the Ashes stood. By the time this test began, the Ashes urn was already safe in Australian hands. Their dominance across the series had been built on ruthless batting, relentless bowling, and an unshakable confidence at home. England arrived at the final test with pride on the line rather than silverware. Injuries had disrupted their balance. Inconsistency had haunted their top order. And questions were growing louder about the direction of the team, the leadership, and the future. Australia, meanwhile, had nothing to prove, but everything to reinforce. A strong finish would underline their superiority and send a message to the rest of the cricketing world. The stage was set at a packed ground. The pitch looked true. The weather was favourable. And the expectation was clear: Australia would finish the job. Day 1, Australia take early control. From the opening session, Australia played like a team that knew exactly who they were. Their batters were patient, composed, and ruthless when England erred. The bowlers, when given their turn, were disciplined and aggressive, applying pressure without panic. England tried different angles. They rotated bowlers. They searched for early breakthroughs. But Australia absorbed it all. Partnerships began to build, not with reckless aggression, but with authority. Singles were taken calmly. Boundaries were placed deliberately. Every over without a wicket tightened the grip. By the end of the first day, the tone had been set. This was Australia's match to lose. The Australian batting machine. Australia's strength throughout the series had been their ability to turn good starts into commanding positions. And once again, their senior batters led the way. There was control against spin. There was certainty against pace. Short balls were pulled with confidence. Full deliveries were driven with balance and timing. England's bowlers found moments of encouragement, but never momentum. Every time pressure seemed to build, an Australian batter found a release, a crisp cover drive, a well-judged pull shot, or a perfectly placed cut. The scoreboard ticked relentlessly upward. England struggles with the ball. For England, the frustration was visible. Fielders chased leather for long periods. Bowlers returned to their marks with hands on hips. The energy dipped. It wasn't a lack of effort, it was a lack of reward. Edges fell short. Chances didn't come. And when mistakes did arrive, Australia punished them without mercy. This was high-class test batting, the kind that doesn't collapse, doesn't panic, and doesn't offer easy opportunities. By the time Australia's innings reached its later stages, the sense of inevitability was growing stronger. The first innings statement. Australia's total was massive. The kind of score that changes how a test match feels, how captains think, and how batters approach their task. England were no longer chasing runs. They were chasing relevance in the match. And when England finally took the field to bat, the pressure was immediate and intense. England's first innings, under the microscope. From the very first over, Australia's bowlers hunted wickets. The ball moved. The bounce was lively. The crowd sensed blood. England's top order needed calm. What they delivered instead was uncertainty. Early wickets fell. One after another, promising starts dissolved into disappointment. The scoreboard told a harsh story, and it told it quickly. Australia were relentless. Every batter who walked out faced a field set for attack, not containment. England needed someone to stand firm. They didn't find it. Momentum shifts hard Australia's way. By the middle of England's first innings, the match already felt lopsided. The gap between the teams was clear, in confidence, execution, and belief. Australia sensed the kill. They pushed forward. They squeezed harder. England, in response, looked reactive rather than proactive. When England were finally dismissed, the deficit was severe, and the test match, at that point, felt all but decided. Australia doubled down. With a huge lead in hand, Australia had options. They could bat again and bury England, or they could attack with the ball and force the issue. Either way, the pressure was entirely one-sided. England walked back onto the field knowing that survival, not victory, was now the primary goal. And yet, cricket, as it so often does, was quietly preparing something unexpected. The calm before the storm. As England began their second innings, there was little external belief. Commentators spoke of damage limitation. Fans debated how quickly Australia might wrap things up. But inside the England dressing room, there was still one goal: resistance. Early overs were about survival. Soft hands. Straight bats. Minimal risk. Wickets still fell. And once again, England were in trouble. Entered Jacob Bethell, an unlikely hero. When Jacob Bethell walked to the crease, few could have predicted what would follow. Young. Relatively inexperienced. Batting in a side under siege. This was not the moment designed for heroics. And yet, sometimes, the greatest innings come not from expectation, but from freedom. Bethell began quietly, respecting the bowlers, trusting his defense, playing late. There was no rush, no attempt to dominate, just survival. The first signs of something special. As the session progressed, something changed. Bethell stopped merely surviving and started responding. A push through cover here, a confident pull there. Shots that weren't reckless, but weren't fearful either. Australia noticed. The field shifted. The bowlers adjusted. The plan evolved. But Bethell remained unmoved. He wasn't playing the occasion. He wasn't playing the scoreboard. He was playing the ball. The crowd realizes. Test cricket crowds have a unique sense for moments that matter. And slowly, the noise began to change. Applause followed good shots. Murmurs followed near misses. England was still far behind, but something was happening. Bethell was growing in confidence. His footwork sharpened. His shot selection became more assertive. Australia, for the first time in days, were being asked questions. End of part 1. At this point in the match, Australia was still firmly in control, but the rhythm had shifted. What began as damage control was quietly transforming into resistance. And in the next phase of this test, that resistance would turn into something far more memorable.